Good afternoon, everybody from East Asia, or good morning or good evening if you are joining us from other time zones. Welcome to New Directions East Asia 2021. This session is entitled The Variety of Error Types in Simple versus Complex Oral Dialogic Tasks. And the presenter is Vasim Tamboli. Dr. Vasim Tamboli has a PhD in English language education from the English and Foreign Languages University. He has worked as a research associate on ESRD FID funded project named Multilingualism and Multiliteracy, Raising Learning Outcomes in Challenging Contexts in Primary Schools Across China. His interest in language assessment, community, and multiple education. If you have any questions for the presenter, please type them into the box during the time of the session. We will have minutes at the end where we answer these questions that you pose. I will now hand over to Vasim. Please start sharing your screen and begin when you're ready.
Sure, William. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction of mine. I'll just take a minute to share my screen. William, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can, Dr. Vasim.
All right, thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, because in India it's good afternoon, and good evening to William. You are based in China. So, all right. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the issues in assessing speaking and types of variety of errors when we conduct any speaking assessment. So these are the points that I'll be talking about in coming 15 or 20 minutes. Take a moment to go through the slide. So basically, I would like to give a brief overview of this presentation. After having completed or finished my PhD, I have joined college here where I'm working as a lecturer. And when I talked to my colleagues here, so they randomly they had one discussion. So it was about speaking assessment, and they had this issue with when the learners are making errors, then how should we go about it? How should we treat these learners? And based on our discussion, we had a couple of points to talk about. So they talked about surface level errors, error corrections, and I could get some opposite as well as supportive views. So opposite views, our students might get scared of the corrections that we make, and supporting views like students themselves, they want to know about their errors and they want us to correct their errors. And we also need to know and provide learners with variety of reasons that they are making errors, but we should give this through concrete feedback, and we should use our assessment not as of assessment, but for and as learning. And yes, we also talked about there should be variety of ways so that we can push them produce more output, no matter they make errors, but we can get to know the kind of errors they are making. And finally, we should also need to have a look at the contextual use of language, and not only the error types they are making. But nevertheless, when we talk about errors, it's not to the errors are not bad. They're a sign of language development. And in a typical situation, when learners in ESL situations, it's learning L2 is a very much development, which is very much dynamic process and not static process that happens at one point of time. So yes, we should encourage learners to use a lot more speaking, and we should make them use their language, oral language. So we should not treat our speaking activities or oral tasks as only as fluency activities or versus accuracy activity, but the same activity can be treated as fluency and equally weightage given to the accurate use of language. So moving to the next slide. So as we can see in the slide, so of these we start with the general issues in assessing speaking. There is a need to establish a relationship among the three factors in order to make our assessment more feasible, systematic, and beneficial for the learners. There is a need to make our assessment need to establish a relationship among the three factors: what we assess, how we assess, and how we score the learner performances. Again, speaking is a meaning-making process which has a different components of it, or aspects of oral language production, like fluency, accuracy, and language complexity, which all the three need to be treated equally. We also have, like, when we assess learner speaking, we actually need them to use language and produce language using open-ended tasks, and they have to use language under strict time limit. And it can happen either in a monologic way or dialogic way, where two learners are involved. And when we design such activities or tasks, we need to consider their target language use domain, the kind of language they are using, or the kind of everyday activities they are involved in. So when we have open-ended tasks and our learners have given detailed description or extended discourse, so the issue of interpreter reliability comes in, and we can have task-specific assessment criteria to deal with the issues. And by considering all these issues, we are trying to attend to the 5 principles of assessment to make our assessment more systematic and more valid, and that is beneficial for our learners. So in this presentation, I would like to talk about the task design theories. So if you look at the earlier theories, like task design theory by Prabhu, based on his Bangalore project, and matrix of task complexity by Brown, they have already talked about the tasks and different task characteristics, but they haven't discussed about its impact on the aspects of language production vis-a-vis aspects of oral language production, like accuracy, fluency, and complexity. But when we talk about the later models like Scahan and Robinson, they talk about the task and its effects on the oral production in terms of fluency, accuracy, or complexity. Scahan talks about his model. So he argues that human brain has limited capacity. So when learner tries to focus on form, that is accuracy, his attention to meaning gets reduced. So either there could be development in more accurate performances versus more fluent or a complex performance. Whereas in the later model, in Cognition Hypothesis, Robinson argues that human brain has multidimensional attentional capacity. So at a point, human brain can attend to all the 3 aspects of oral language, and there could be a linear growth or a better production in terms of language fluency and accuracy versus complexity. So moving to the next slide, with Cognition Hypothesis, Robinson states that a gradual sequencing of tasks from simple to complex will help learners achieve better output. It is because the human brain has multidimensional attentional resources, and for this the necessary condition is that that is minimum proficiency in the target language, or adequate proficiency in the target language. So it happens because he discusses task complexity that refers to intrinsic demands of a task feature that creates cognitive load, and he has categorized in conceptual complexity, procedural complexity, and transactional complexity. So I'm not going to get into detail, but the conceptual demands that lead to greater attention to produce more content, procedural demand increases task complexity, but not to any of these three aspects of language production. And transactional demand happens where dialogue happens. Learners get an opportunity to negotiate and this is how they create language meaning making opportunity for themselves. So if there are, the cognition hypothesis states that if there are negotiations happening in dialogic tasks, learners are able to create more meaning making opportunities through the transactional modifications, through the which are interaction based. So with this argument, like I already had submit my thesis, and when I got into discussion with my colleagues, and then I thought, why don't I like reanalyze data and see, like, does it really happen, like when we have tasks of different cognitive levels and interactional tasks, does it really matters that the way students are showing the error patterns? So I attempted to answer this question. The first question is related to whether the task complexity leads to accurate use of oral performances, and if yes, are there instances of task-specific oral performances in terms of error types and intentional interactional modifications? I conducted this study with 12 ESL learners who, at the time of study, they were enrolled in class 9 in regional medium schools, and they was, as per CFR level, they were at A2 level, so they could talk about their likes and dislikes, and they could ask and answer simple question for exchanging general information. So this was the first task I used. So I term it like dialogic simple task. So in this task, they just had to give and ask for information and express their likes and dislikes. And the task features, it has like, they had to talk about what is happening at present, not what was missing or what will come in future. And if I compare this with the next task that I'm going to show you, this is the simple task. So let us go to the next task. So this is a dialogic complex task. So in which the theme of the task is vacation, and learners, they needed to decide on a place that they are going to visit as a school trip or class trip. So in this class, there is here and now feature was missing. So there and then feature was present. It means they had to talk about the near future event. It had a lot more elements, like it had various points: distance, transportation, length of stay. Again, they had to consider another another person's perspective. The more steps were required. For example, if I have to decide on a topic, decide on a place, I really cannot decide on a place, but before that I really had to undergo some stages. Like I had to propose a topic, ask my like fellow classmates in a discussion, propose my opinion and ask for their opinion, agreement, disagreement. So we had these many different stages, which was missing in the simple task. So the task required the negotiation on their part. So these are the two tasks I administered with the 12 learners. So when analyzing the data, I tried understanding the surface level errors through the error-free C units. Then when I identified the different categories of surface level errors, I tried to focus or concentrate on task-specific errors for the detailed analysis of it. Then, as an addition to help my colleagues with the assessment criteria, then we tried to use the can-do statement as self-assessment tool. We also tried to use task-specific requirements in terms of language functions. So as you can see here, simple task versus dialogic task, there were more number of instances of erroneous C units in dialogic complex tasks. It is with bare eyes, it seems there are more number of errors in dialogic tasks, but given the fact that the text length was extended in the dialogic task, and so I have given here percentage count. If you look at the percentage count here for erroneous units, it is almost similar. Number free error units are also similar, and the proportion of error-free units to the total number of units is not much different. So the data shows that instances of error types, but no increase as in sync with task complexity. So I could identify different error types across the 12 learners' performances across both the tasks. And I could see more number of errors, like when it came to question framing. And I decided to have a magnifying glass and look at these categories. What could be the reasons they have? In fact, it is a truth that they have used more number of question framings as a requirement of the task, and what must have gone here, like what kind of questions they have tried to frame. So more number of errors I could see here for auxiliary drop, preposition drop, and question framing. So I decided to have a detailed look at the question framing. So if you look at here, there are 4 different types of question framings were used by the learners. And of this, like most number of questions are for information questions, which are simple questions under simple dialogic task. So this way they have used 47 incorrect questions where they really had to use simple questions. And when we look at the task, complex tasks, so confirmation questions, classification, clarification, and agreement questions, there are a couple number of questions for dialogic tasks as well. So here, like simple tasks required learners to ask and answer general questions versus complex dialogic tasks required them to use follow-up questions as well in order to negotiate and arrive at their decision. These are some of the examples of question types. So in simple task, it was quite simple for them just to state likes and dislikes and ask for simple information. Whereas in dialogic complex task, they really tried to go a level up, and they incorporated some of the language functions as it was requirement of the task. So having looked at, they have actually used a variety of questions. Then as what I tried to look at how they have used interactional modifications, which help learners create meaning-making opportunities in any dialogic task. So, but when I tried analyzing the data set for these interactional modifications, I could not get many such instances. Very few instances of interactional modifications were seen across the learner performances on both the tasks. So they used, like in clarification request, I could see they have used clarification request, but not to check the understanding, but to ask for more details that generally happens in simple task. There were like a few instances where they have shown the recast. There is a instances of priming where they have corrected themselves linguistically by their partner's speech. So such instances vary a few. And for this, I have some observations, like a series of tasks is required at not only 2 tasks at one go. So this could be the limitations of this particular experiment. And learners did not correct each other because they could be at similar level of language proficiency, and they were in a flow, they were enjoying speaking, and they really wanted to complete the task. That could be one of the reasons. And they were not very much well aware of the errors that they were making. So and they created meaning making opportunities, but they didn't pay much attention to the errors, and surface level errors did not impact their understanding. And just as I stated, they enjoyed their meaning making process. So they may be given some training in using interactional modifications in order to get the benefits, where they could like request for, if they know this, like these 4 different modifications they could learn in, and in their future like performances they can make use of it. And there this is how like they might minimize on their errors. And I feel this is the one of the reasons that, you know, what Robinson says, like in interaction task, learners create meaning making opportunities, and because of this interactional modifications there are less errors. But this task, like it has only 2 tasks, and learners did not have proper planning because they were at A2 level of proficiency. I could not see like less errors as the task progressed from simple to complex. And yes, like as this particular experiment started with like a discussion triggered by the discussion that I had with my colleagues, so I again had to discuss with them like what could be the like possible solutions that one could import in their own classroom. So I thought like if we can use this task complexity features to incorporate in our classes, so we can actually make our learners use tasks to demonstrate their fluency, and as they progress we can identify the error patterns, which is sign of their interlanguage development, which are very systematic in nature, and accordingly we can give them some input and we can help them with particular language structure. For like the example in this particular experiment we have seen is that the question framing, which is in sync with the requirement of the tasks. And yes, we really just do not need to focus on the kind of errors they are making, but what our learners are able to do in spite of like instances of the errors. So these cognitive features, if we have in our task design process, it might help us make our task and learners to show their fluency as well as accuracy. And this tool, like this is like after the discussion, we're thinking to have assessment that can help us assessment for and as learnings. Give me a 2 minute. Assessment tool. So we're trying to use this assessment tool, self-assessment tool. And I also suggest, like based on this experiment, also like thinking to incorporate the task completion criteria, which does not look at the surface level errors, but the kind of learner's ability to complete the task. In, for example, in our complex task, that was a role play task, and learners had to attend to different steps in the task, and we could have a look at whether the learners are able to identify the different stages and able to attend to those task requirements, even though there are some errors, because the errors are inevitable when there are at A2 level of language proficiency. And yes, these are some of the implications for pedagogical benefits as well as assessment benefits. For pedagogical benefits, we can use certain task types to help learners practice a specific linguistic variety or linguistic items that they might need. They are making more errors and they might need extra practice, and that this is how we can help them develop their interlanguage abilities. For assessment, we can use these task characteristics to match our task with target language use domain and make our assessment criteria more reliable by incorporating not only the error types, but the kind of contextual task requirements the learners are attending to. This is the list of references. Thank you.
Dr. Tamboli, thank you very much for that very insightful presentation. We have a question from the audience, and the question is, how do you think your study can be operationalized for practitioners, so operationalized for teachers?
Yes, thank you for this question. And as you could see in the implications slide, so we can have a series of questions, series of tasks where we can actually direct learners' attention to the variety of linguistic categories. For example, if we have here and now feature in that here and now feature, and which asks learners to talk about what is happening right now. So when a learner, if learner has to talk about a picture which is happening right in front of his eyes, he would be able to use simple present tense or continuous tense. And we can understand if one is able to use that ing v plus ing is at like low level of language proficiency, versus we can give another task which has some task requirements like causal reasoning, or one has to actually take this perspective and think about others' mind. So here, like, we can target specific linguistic functions like thinking about others' mind, and one could use past tense like he suspected, he imagined that.
Thank you very much. Do you think that this study would be easy to replicate?
If you look at the measurement part, it might sound like for assessors or for teachers, it's not that easy. But the thing I have done here, just to try and understand what could be the different varieties we could see. So when we have a tasks in place in relation to task requirements, we can take one task feature and identify one linguistic category and go ahead with that. And we don't have to actually use the measurement in classroom setting, because our teachers are not trained in that way, but they can use task requirement checklist as an assessment criteria. This way it will become feasible.
What are some possible areas of the study that you think need further research?
I have done this. If you look at this particular study, so I only had 2 tasks in it. So I would really like to have a range of tasks which are actually sequenced from simple to complex, and not a pair of tasks, but a variety of tasks. That could be one thing. And how the learners are at different proficiency levels are able to attend to it, because I have dealt with A2 level learners, and I could see with these 2 tasks, there were no instances of interactional modifications. So we can do with college students and see if they are able to use clarification checks, modification requests, comprehension checks. If that is missing, we can give them instruction with that.
Great, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the session. To everybody listening, please leave us some feedback on this particular session by answering the 2 very short survey questions next to the screen. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much again for the presentation. And I hope you continue to enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much, everybody.